I'm here just to introduce the panel, a really star-studded panel, I gotta say. Let's see how we're gonna do it. Well, yes, we'll start at the end of the table on my left, your right, is Daniel Swafford, who is the Executive Director of the Montclair Village Association. Next to him is Captain Chris Bolton, who is Captain of Police for Area 2, which extends from Emeryville all the way up to the Contra Costa line over North Oakland. Next is District Attorney Nancy O'Malley, Councilmember Sheng Thao, and myself as another panel member later. But what I really want to do is introduce you to the person who is the spark plug of putting this together on very short notice and who's going to moderate this meeting, Senn, who used to be our District 4 school board member. And with that.
Thank you, Michael. Sometimes I am accused of not speaking loud enough, but I don't like to shout. So can those in the back hear me? Thank you. Okay, excellent. Okay, I think that tells me that I can stand just here. Before I get started, I want to acknowledge the other elected officials in the room. We have Councilmember Noel Gallo, you used to be on the school board as well, and Councilmember Kalb. Are there any other elected officials in the room? Okay, thank you. Sorry? A chair. Oh, you're looking, there's a chair, empty chair for somebody. This is very personal to me, as I'm sure it's to all of you because you came tonight. I have been a resident of Oakland for over 20 years. Most of those years, almost 20 of those years, have been here in Montclair. My husband and I chose Montclair and Oakland out of looking at a variety of different cities across the state of California, and we built our life here and raised our children here. My 2 children went to preschool in this building. I'm a member of this church. My children went to Montclair and Montclair Elementary School and Montclair Middle School. And many of you are my friends and colleagues and neighbors. So when we had a terrible, tragic event on New Year's Eve, losing one of our community, it became very clear to me that it was time for us to convene and talk about how we can turn things around. And this is not the only thing that's ever happened in our community. Many of us have experienced some kind of harm or loss. And it doesn't just happen in Oakland. And in the various places where I've lived, I've also experienced different crimes. But that doesn't mean it has to keep going. And that's up to all of us in this room. So as part of my background, I'm doing this as a volunteer because I love this community and I love you. And part of my background is as a restorative justice practitioner and as a mediator and facilitator. And as part of that practice, it's really important to kind of check in with everyone, and that would be a little bit challenging tonight, wouldn't it? And it's also to establish some meeting norms so that everybody feels comfortable. We did our best to try to make this as efficient as a meeting as possible. It's going to go quickly. It is scheduled to go to 8:30, but the time is going to go very quickly. But this doesn't mean this is the only meeting that we'll ever have to try to keep improving. So in terms of meeting norms, these are some pretty classic ones that are used in community meetings. Things like being respectful, honoring the time, being able to have one speaker speak and everybody else is listening. And if there becomes a point, and I don't think that's going to be the case in this community, but if it does become the case where we need to refocus, I'm going to do what I often do in the schools, which is I'm going to go like this. And if you see me, I'd like you to copy me until we get everybody kind of back into the same place. Is that reasonable for everyone? Yes. Okay, thank you. In terms of an agenda flow, what we're going to do tonight is I'm going to actually ask each of the panel members to talk a little bit about who they are and their area of responsibility and why this work is important to them. And I'm also going to just generally take you through a classic agenda, which is we're going to ground this conversation tonight in an overview, which I've asked Captain Bolton to provide in terms of, I think it's important to be grounded in the data, whether it's positive or negative. We just need to be real about what it is. And we need to look at what the resources are available and what are some of the tips that we can do to take on board for crime prevention purposes. And then we have Q&A. Thank you for those that submitted your questions in advance. I went through them last night. I organized them by speaker. We have quite a few. And I'm also receiving some speaker cards. I think there's some cards being circulated. If we don't get to your questions tonight, we will follow up with your questions if you provide contact information. Also, we can look at posting them on the Montclair Neighborhood Council so that everybody receives the same information. And then what's really important are next steps. Because this is, I've been looking at next door for good or for bad. And this is not all about lip service. This is serious. And so we're going to we have some very serious people sitting here on the panel, and we're going to be looking at, what we come out with tonight and following up, and there'll be a number of us who will be holding everybody accountable. So let's proceed on that basis. Before I kind of go into the introductions a little bit more, I also want to just kind of gauge the room a little bit. We usually do kind of a check-in when we have our meetings, and so I'm going to need to do this in a way that works for the group. There's a lot of different feelings and thoughts that are being circulated and felt. I know this, but just being in conversation at the vigil, which on Sunday, which by the way, if the organizers are here, could you raise your hand for the vigil on Sunday? Susan Graham was amazing. Okay. In the back, thank you so much. It was, so we need to transition from that place into where we need to go forward. And so just by raising your hands, if you would, how many are here to learn more about what we can do? Please raise your hands. Thank you. How many of you are feeling concerned about what's been happening in our community? How many of you are feeling some sense of anger, frustration, outrage? Okay, thank you. Sadness, thank you. Grief. But how many of you want to be part of the solution? Thank you, because it's going to take all of us, and I'm sure that the panelists would also be raising their hands too, because that's why they're here. The goals for tonight are really to have an exchange of information, really to understand where your needs are through your questions, and also for the panelists to respond to them. And then it's collective bargaining. Oh gosh, I'm having PTSD, Noel. So collective problem solving, looking for solutions. And so if I feel like we're kind of veering off, I am going to be the enforcer. I know I don't look particularly fierce, but ask my husband. I am pretty fierce when I need to be. And so that pretty much rounds out what I wanted to start with. What I'd like to do now is have each of the panelists go through and talk about their area of responsibility, because I know that's sometimes a mystery for a lot of us. Their area of responsibility, why they do the work they do, and then when those introductions are completed, then I'm going to invite Captain Bolton to come up and talk about the data and resources, et cetera. All right? So, Michael, could you start?
Thank you. The Montclair Neighborhood Council is part of the structure of community policing that Oakland has been struggling to implement for at least 15 years, if not longer. So we work very closely as we are the interface between you and those who serve our city in OPD. For example, the next person I talk to, if you would stand, please. This is our Community Resource Officer, Officer Duenas. She is the one who takes our complaints and our priorities, synthesizes them, and then passes them up the chain of command through OPD. So we are mostly, what we do is, again, form the interface between your concerns and their abilities as an intermediary. We hold quarterly meetings where we provide public safety information, be it fire safety, depending on the time of the year, various other things that have to do with public safety. We're all volunteers. I'm the only one on this panel who doesn't get paid for doing what I do. Other than Nina, of course, but she's not on the panel. And we do this because it's our community and we want to make it the best community it can be. So I hope, and I'm going to ask the people who are actually volunteers on the board to please stand and raise your hand to show those who have given their time and many Thursday nights to be here in this room often and to provide that function as the ears and voice of the community. So the more the merrier. So if any of you want to come here, please do. Thank you.
All right, I'm just going to go down the row here. Councilmember Sheng Thao, and also if you'd like to introduce your colleagues.
Sure. So Councilmember Gallo, thank you so much for being here, and Councilmember Kalb as well. My name is Councilmember Sheng Thao. I am the council member representing this district, and so basically what the council members do, if you can actually view it kind of like the federal branch, where the council members are the legislative branch. So we create policy and legislation, and the executive branch would be the mayor's office and city administrator's office. So not only do we write and create policies and legislation, but we are your representative, and so for everything. And so if it's potholes or if it's a down tree or what have you, you can call my office. And I do have staffers here, Brandon Harami back here, and then out here, Matt and Amari as well. And I do have a newsletter that goes out about things that we're working on and policies that are coming up for decision making. And so if you want to sign up, I know that they have some sign up sheets in the back as well. But I am your representative. And so with any issues around the district in regards to the city, I am the person in the office that you can call on for resources. You can get a hold of us at 510-238-7004 or email at district4, the number 4, at oaklandca.gov.
We'll write it down on the flip chart. Next, I'd like to introduce District Attorney Nancy O'Malley.
Go to the podium. Is that the easiest thing? Yeah. Okay. Thank you. Thank you for having me here. The tragedy that happened on New Year's Eve is one that I'm sorry to tell you is happening way too often. And that's one of the focuses of my office. So I am the district attorney. We are responsible for filing criminal charges against people that have committed crimes that we can prove. But we do much more than prosecute. We have an environmental unit. We have a consumer protection unit. We have a whole civil division. I have 160 attorneys that work in the office, and I've got 72 sworn investigators. So they're police officers who just work for the DA's office. I have 40 victim advocates who work in my office that are helping victims of crime when they come into our system. Even when a crime is not solved, the victim advocates are reaching out to people to be able to help them and support them and to tell them about the resources that we have available for them. And particularly for people that don't have means, that we bring in about $4 million a year from the federal government to help pay for people, either medical bills or counseling or relocation or buying a service dog or whatever the person needs. So we do prosecute cases, misdemeanor, the lower level cases. that can, if somebody goes to jail, they could go up to jail for up to 1 year. And we also prosecute felony cases, and those are the more serious cases that can carry up to life sentence for murder and things like that. When a couple of years back, when we started seeing an uptick in car break-ins, and some of the changes in the law, where we saw more thefts, retail thefts, and things like that, I created a special unit. So I've got a specialized unit with prosecutors, investigators, and victim advocates who work with victims of crime who have fallen prey to that type of behavior. I'm sure that Captain Bolton's going to talk more about this, but the police do the investigation of the cases, and then they bring them to my office, and I have lawyers that review those cases to determine whether or not there's enough evidence to file charges, and if in fact there is, did the person that has been arrested, are they the person who should be charged with the crime? So we work, in that respect, we work closely with law enforcement, and it's important for us to be able to have that communication so that they know that when they're out doing the work or solving crimes, they're bringing them to us, that we're bringing the people into court. Now, I'll just say that one of the things that we've seen in the last couple of years is that some of these theft-type crimes, or even these laptop thefts that are happening in Starbucks and other places, have oftentimes involved younger people. So we have a lot of programs for younger people who come into the criminal justice system to help them find a different pathway. They're in court, but they're also in school, or they're in job training, or they're doing something. And I will tell you that the investment that we've made in working with young people that have come to us because they've stolen someone's cell phone, or they've broken into cars, or they've gone to the grocery store and stole $950 worth of food and walked out, whatever it is, that those individuals, 80% of those individuals that we have worked with have not come back to the justice system, and they haven't, to our knowledge, committed more crimes. So part of what we do is prosecute, but a lot of what we do is trying to help people find a different way of living their life so they don't continue to victimize other people. The other thing that we're very focused on are 3 areas. Guns. We have too many guns in our community, and gun violence is rampant. And we've just recently issued a gun report about guns, the status of guns and gun violence in Alameda County. And we focus on also interpersonal violence, family violence, human trafficking, and areas like that. And just, again, prosecute, but we're very heavy on our victim advocacy and supporting people who have been victims of crime.
Thank you, District Attorney. All right, I think, Daniel, if you could come next, and then we finish with the introductions with Captain Bolton, then he can continue with the overview. Thank you. Oh, sorry. He's the Executive Director for the Montclair Village Association. Thank you.
Thank you, Nina, and good evening. The Montclair Village Association it's a nonprofit. It's a business improvement district that represents the merchants of Montclair. We have a couple board members here this evening. I'd just like to introduce them. I see and longtime business owners, Howard Neal and Tom Ravelli with Montclair Sports. I think I saw Pat back there with Mix, one of our board members. I don't know if there's any other board member in the room or business owner. And we have our assistant director, Tony Mikulka, in the back at our display table. So what we do is to use the resources that come from assessments that the individual business owners pay. They go back into the 501c3, the nonprofit, and we try to use them as much as possible for fun things. That's sort of the charter of a business improvement district. A lot of times what you'll see in an inner city environment is business improvement districts helping to supplement some of the services and programs that the local municipality just cannot afford. So a number of our budget items include programs and projects around public safety and wanting to ensure that there's a safe place for people to come and spend their time, socialize with friends, families, neighbors, and to spend their money and support the business community and the business ownership of Montclair. We have been implementing programs recently around security cameras and surveillance. Many of you, some may be in the room, have reached out to me recently with contributions to support that. So thank you. Thank you for that generosity. Through a GoFundMe a little over a year ago and a generous grant from Lucky Save Mart, we were able to install a number of camera systems in public spaces in the district, and that was some of the technology that we used recently in supporting OPD in their effort to pursue and make an arrest in this New Year's Eve incident that occurred. So we're wanting to reassure you all that this is a wonderful place to come and spend time and support a business community that really does give back to those that are in the community as well. And we're open to thoughts, ideas, partnerships. Volunteerism is important. We have a newsletter sign up at the back table if you'd like to get information about the events, the projects, the programs, ways you can be involved and ways you can support. And we work actively through the Montclair Neighborhood Council here as well. So we stay abreast of the support that they provide to the community as well. Thank you.
Thank you, Daniel.
What about a Starbucks executive?
Well, I think that they were invited to join us in terms of the attendance, but this is all about how we can support you from a community and elected official perspective. We could have a follow-on conversation on the commercial basis. I don't know, Daniel, if there's anything else you want to add at this point. Okay, so please, there's some question cards. I will address that question though, but if there's any other questions, who has some blank cards that can make them available, please raise your hand if you have questions and would like to submit a question card. In terms of, I'm just going to answer the question related to the mayor, because when I was at the vigil on Sunday, there was a few people that asked, and also there were some questions that came in through the email address for a question gathering. And anytime that someone is lost in the city of Oakland, it hits the mayor very hard. And when I asked her I mentioned to her that people were asking about her presence or lack thereof. What her response was reminded me a lot of what my father told us. I come from a family of 4 children. And because of his personal experience, he made it a point that none of us were to be favored, and that everybody was to be treated fairly and the same. And so what happens is that for the mayor, well, I'm sure she would like to go to every single service. If she goes to one, but she misses one, can you imagine how those that she missed would feel? What the mayor does do is she makes a personal contact with the family of those that are lost. Okay, thank you. Captain Bolton, would you join us and also do an introduction and then go ahead and start with your remarks? Thank you.
Thank you so much. I am Chris Bolton. I'm a captain of police. I've worked with your Oakland Police Department for over 20 years now. There are other members of my staff somewhere in the room. I've attended many meetings in this place, and it's never has been this well attended. Where are you? Lieutenant Rosen is in the very back corner. Sergeant Mangui is our new Community Resource Officer Sergeant, and Lieutenant Rosen, if I didn't say, supervises what we call our crime reduction team officers and our community resource officers. Christine, who you've met, Officer Jurgens Duenas, is your Beat 13 community resource officer. I had a prepared bullet point type presentation to go over, but to be quite honest with you, the amount of people here and you all raising your hands about the fear, the concern, the anger, has impacted me on an emotional level. And so I'm going to speak a little bit more from the heart than from a prepared speech. On December 31st, I was in my office and I was meeting with organizers at St. Columbo Church on San Pablo. They do an annual cross ceremony every year. I had literally just told him and hung up the phone that our final number of homicides in 2019 was 74. That was at the time that I had heard that there was a auto pedestrian accident at about 11:35 hours, 11:35 a.m., sorry for the military time. My lieutenant went out, the sergeant went out, your beat 13 officer was immediately dispatched, as were other officers. It then became apparent at that time that this is more than just a traffic accident. Those officers began to piece together that this was a laptop theft, turned into a robbery, turned into an act made by the suspect and now defendant in this case that caused Mr. Zeng to lose his life. I have been overwhelmed by the amount of community support, community participation, the vigil on Sunday, the Post-it notes on the makeshift memorial. This is a tremendous community. However, and this will be my only ask of you, is that whenever I get good attendance at a community meeting is when something really bad has happened. I ask you, I urge you to help us, help the men and women of this police department, help your neighbors, help yourselves to maintain this vigilance and this drive to sustain and improve our community for the better of all of our neighborhoods. That being said, a couple stipulations. I don't plan on taking the 20 minutes that was allotted to me. I may or may not. Whenever I speak, I will speak openly, honestly, and as transparently as I can. Inevitably, someone in this room will take offense, will disagree, and that's fine. That's what conversation is for. My ask of you is please don't leave tonight. If I have said something that may have been misunderstood, if it's something you want more information about, if it's something that it's going to cause you anger, I will be here for as long as possible tonight, as long as necessary. I will meet with everyone who wants more information on something I've said. That is my oath to you for this evening. Can I kind of take an informal poll if we're here, most of us tonight, to learn about the issue of laptop thefts in Montclair as a specific issue, or would you like to know more of the overall crime on this police beat overall? I'm seeing, okay, overall. That is about as unanimous as I can get. Let me start with a review of how the Oakland Police Department is organized. We have police officers and professional staff. Police officers, right now, we have 732. I told the council member 730 today. I found 2 hiding under a rug, and we put them to work immediately. We have 732 sworn officers. They are assigned, obviously, to every one of our 35 beats across the city. Those 35 beats are subdivided into what we call bureaus. We have 2 bureaus. One, for lack of a better term, is West Oakland. Bureau of Field Operations 2 is East Oakland. Within our bureau, Bureau 1, we have 3 police areas. Don't be confused when I give you a police area. I'm the captain for Police Area 2. That has nothing to do with Council District 2 or Council District 4. The police areas overlap on, I actually serve 3 council districts. Those are patrol officers. We have 3 different shifts. Beat 13, your beat, if you didn't know that is not just Montclair, which is Community Policing Beat 13Z, but also has a 13X and a 13Y. Beat 13 is our largest geographic beat in the city of Oakland, and I have a total of 7 beats in my police area. Beat 13 so I don't know, they kind of zigs and zags into different council districts, but yeah, Rockridge, basically all of the hills of Oakland, Upper Rockridge. Yeah, Emeryville to Berkeley border to, where's our cutoff? Redwood Road, I think. No, so let me get to that. So patrol, let me start with patrol officers. So each, we have 3 shifts for a 24-hour period. Technically, Beat 13 has a total of 6 patrol officers assigned to it, but that's for 24 hours, 7 days a week. We work, depending on that shift, we have our officers are working either 3 days a week because they work 12.5-hour shifts each shift, or they're working 4 10-hour shifts. So at any one time, you have at least 1 patrol officer assigned to the all of Beat 13. There are periods within the day that you have more than 1 officer because we have 2 shifts that overlap. We have our daytime shift that overlaps a little bit with our, I guess you would call swing shift. And we have an overlap between our swing shift officers and our graveyard shift officers. Our biggest overlap is between 2 p.m. and 9 p.m., give or take an hour on either side there. Those are just patrol officers. You also have community resource officers. Right now, we have a community resource officer assigned to each beat. As I said, Christine is your assigned Beat 13 community resource officer. We also have a team of crime reduction team officers at my disposal. They are not assigned to a beat. They are more of a flexible deployment force that are able to go anywhere within my area or to other areas, as are, I should mention, your community resource officers. And I'll get to the prioritizations and the type of decision making that I have to make on a daily basis. You also have an officer assigned to Beat 13 as a walking officer. That's Officer Michael Cooper. His assignment is normally geographically to Montclair Village, but at times, as necessary, those assignments included in that flexibility would be the assignments of your community resource officers. At times, we are forced to make decisions to redeploy them differently in another place, depending on crime problems, resource needs, or events as they unfold. Being in the Montclair community and on Beat 13 is both a blessing and a curse, depending on how you look at it. You are the largest policing beat by far, and you are the safest in terms of serious and violent crime. There is less robberies, there are less burglaries, there are almost no shootings, and normally no murders. Overall in North Oakland, we are also blessed with this because over the last 5 years, and by the way, I've worked in North Oakland Police Area 2 as a patrol officer, a field training officer, a lieutenant, and now a captain. So I know the area very well, and I've seen it change for the better. 2019 for North Oakland, we had 3 murders. That is an all-time low. None of those 3 murders were related to gang or group firearms. I've never seen that happen. The first homicide scene that I went to, and the first victim of homicide family that I met was unfortunately a relative who targeted relatives known to him. The second was what I believe was a road rage incident, and a knife was used. And we have this third homicide involving a vehicle during the robbery, as I previously mentioned. A lot of our focus and effort in the city of Oakland has rightfully been on I almost said countless, but they can be counted because each one has a name and each one has a family. A tremendous amount of focus, a tremendous amount of work has gone into reducing that unacceptable figure that has been ever present for as long as I've been a police officer here. Inevitably, Oakland has been called one of the worst cities in the nation, one of the most unsafe, one of the most violent. Rightfully so, we have deployed resources, time, energy, effort, and those dividends seem to be paying off. There were times when I was a patrol officer where I believe the highest was 120 murders in this city in a year. To have, obviously 75 last year is too many, but it's quite a big difference than what it used to be. I have statistics on 13Z, which is your community policing beat, and I also was asked, and I'm not positive who asked me to do it, but I couldn't carve out Montclair Village Association or the village statistics. So I just kept all the statistics applicable to 13Z. And it seems to kind of work out because unfortunately, and this is no surprise to Mr. Swafford, but Montclair Village for 13Z is really kind of the magnet of the types of offenses that we get the most complaints about, and rightfully so, because they're the ones that affect us and our families. And namely, those are aggravated assaults, robberies, and auto burglaries. I did not look at residential burglaries or commercial burglaries. Auto burglary seems to be what is most impacting North Oakland and 13Z. So the blessing and the curse is that you have less of these incidents. I have to look at the police area as an area. I'm responsible for 7 beats. 105,000 people live in North Oakland Police Area 2. It is difficult to wake up every morning, and I have the same routine 7 days a week, 365 days a year. Right now in Police Area 2, I probably average 2 robberies a day. We probably, I could tell you exactly the amount of aggravated assaults, robberies, commercial burglaries, and auto burglaries that I face as a police area is astounding. What I didn't tell you is how, so I told you 732 officers. I explained how they're assigned to patrol beats. I told you how they're assigned to walking officers, crime reduction teams, and community resource officers. We also have sworn officers that work as criminal investigation division investigators. For my police area, I really have 1 robbery investigator assigned. And that's not to say that the captain who is in charge of all of our investigators would not or does not assign more cases to different robbery investigators if the need is there. We have that flexibility and we have done that. But for all intensive purposes, I have 1 investigator for robbery, 1 investigator for burglaries, and kind of I share an investigator for other types of crimes that fall into, grand theft or, larceny, things like that. I think some of the questions that we'll answer will be a little bit more educational. I can tell you some of the things, but real quickly, I met with Mr. Swafford, who is also on my advisory committee for Police Area 2, and there's other members of my advisory committee. Beat 13 is well represented on my advisory committee. I saw Carolyn Burgess, who is on a neighboring 13 beat. Mr. Tigges is also on my advisory committee. Mr. Swafford is on the advisory committee. So the issues that Beat 13 face, although I've already explained that I have to look at things through a lens of priority, you are well represented in my mind and at the table. Thank you for being here. We ask a tremendous amount of you to take time away from your families, from your homes, from your businesses. I wish that I could get more of you to attend at our regularly scheduled meetings, but I know that that's asking a lot. The things I've committed to, I'll end with. For short term, I cannot make promises because it's ultimately not up to me. I have restored Officer Cooper full-time, all of his shift, as the walking officer for Beat 13. On the day of this incident, he was asked to split his shift between Montclair Village and either Frankagawa downtown area, Chinatown, and potentially Jack London Square. I'm not 100% positive. I've also made a commitment that some of the crimes in terms of property theft, So I know that there are people here whose stores have been targeted by thieves, and admittedly, sometimes those crimes go without investigation and assignment just for the sheer number of crimes we deal with and the sheer number of investigators that we really don't have. Lieutenant Rosen is starting with us for this full year. He comes from Criminal Investigations Division. So we have decided, I'll give him credit for the idea of, for some of these offenses, and we've already seen fruit of this year. I can't talk because we're still working on some arrests. Officer Juergens joined us today. Her community resource officers and crime reduction team officers arrested a robbery suspect, a commercial burglary suspect for the third time, the same individual. The robbery suspect, to the district attorney's point, was 15 years old and not his first offense. That is something that we have been dealing with too often. It's also something I've talked with Chief Cespedes, who is the chief of our violence, I always forget the name of his, violence reduction, violence prevention something rather. But he has been attending our shooting reviews, our crime meetings, and is well invested. What did I tell you? Robbery suspect, commercial burglary suspect, and we also are actively working 2 incidents, one of which is centered in Montclair Village, and I've been keeping close conversation with Mr. Swafford about the progress of that investigation. We have committed to doing that whenever and wherever possible throughout this year. Earlier today, Mr. Swafford, Tony, myself were there. We met with representatives of, can I say who? Is there any issue? Starbucks, Pete's, and some local businesses also. We had a session of collaboration of what would success look like if we used this unfortunate incident for good and progress and sustainability. We will have a plan. It's not set in stone yet, but it was apparent to me from everybody at the table that people were willing to chip in, that we had ideas, we thought that we could do things better, and I count myself among that crowd. I will never tell you I'm doing the best job I can. I will always tell you that I will try to do better. And I think that, again, what will come out of this unfortunate incident is greater collaboration, even more so than with Montclair Village Association. And I think Daniel had mentioned it, but and I won't be talking about this individual case because obviously it's not only an active investigation, but it's a matter for court. But I can tell you that the presence of video was instrumental. That is something, that's community collaboration, the epitome of community collaboration. If it were not for Daniel, I know for a fact we would not have as many cameras or as many high quality cameras. The ability for me, and I started to tell you about my morning routine. I wake up at 6 a.m. and I look at all the serious and violent offenses that have occurred in the past 24 hours. The very first thing I look for, and this is true if you own a home in Montclair, this is true if you own a business, the very first thing our officers should be asking for, trying to get, and the very first thing I'm going to ask people to follow up on the next day is their video. Did you find a camera? Can we find the owner of that camera? You would be surprised at how many times we find cameras, people don't know how to download their own footage. We have a plan for that this year too. Every patrol officer will have a thumb drive. We're going to try to collect video as soon as possible. The quickest we get video pictures of a suspect vehicle, a suspect, the sooner people out there, those 730 officers, 732 officers I told you about, are there, willing and ready. The first thing they want to do is to make not only an arrest, but an arrest that is meaningful and fresh. We want to make sure that that preliminary investigation is tight. We want to tie it up in a bow, and we walk it over to District Attorney O'Malley's office. So the sooner we can do that, the better. And I think that as a community, my second ask of you would be to explore your own blocks, your homes, your businesses. If you see an opportunity for a high-resolution camera and you feel comfortable owning and maintaining that and sharing it when and if needed, that's what I would really appreciate. And that's probably the number one thing that I can think of that you can help almost immediately. I have hit my time like 10 minutes ago, I think, so I'm...
Thank you, Captain Bolton. All right, we're going to be entering our panel part, and we have a lot of questions, and we're going to try to get through what we can in 30 minutes, and then we're going to talk about next steps and what we can all do. Before I dive into that, I want to recognize Councilmember Lynette Gibson McElhaney. Where are you, Councilmember? She is. Thank you. And also there was a request for Dan Kalb, but we have recognized Dan Kalb. Okay. Chief Guillermo Cispuedes, I think, was going to try to attend. Chief, are you here by chance? Thank you. Our new Chief of Violence Prevention from the City of Oakland, Guillermo Cispuedes. Thank you. He just started, and there are some questions that came in already for him, but I did not ask him to come up and be put on the spot because he needs to have a chance to put his department in order, but if something calls to him, I will let him take that initiative tonight. We have a mic, great, with the panel, excellent. So I am going to try to spread out the questions as much as I can, a little bit challenging on real time to sort them appropriately. Before I do that, there was a request. I wish I had, I wanted to include these as well. There's a couple of questions where they asked to have a show of hands on a couple of very sensitive questions. So I will, I think it's a good idea to do them. So I will. How many in this room have been, or you or a family member have been a crime victim? Wow, I have as well. I have as well. And how many of those in the room are considering leaving the City of Oakland? Okay. So, in terms of our questions, I'm going to identify those that have provided their names. This one came from Carla Din, who provided quite a few questions. I think she wasn't going to be able to be present, but asked for video, so thank you very much for the coverage so that we can provide that to those community members that could not be here. The question is, for our panel, is what immediate steps can be taken to increase the safety of our community in a consistent fashion? Would you like to start, Councilmember?
So as we're talking about immediate steps, is that better? So I work closely with I have 3 area captains in District 4, and I work closely with all the area captains along with the CROs and the NSC, which is the Neighborhood Services Coordinator that helps with the coordination with the CRO in the community that will take that back to OPD. And so what I can do from my office is continue to work with the neighborhood associations, continue to work with the captain, and continue to work with the business association. And in the ways that we can do that is that previously I have conducted a public safety walk in the neighborhood, in the business corridor in the Laurel. So that's something that I'm going to work on with the NSC and the police officers here in Montclair as well. And that's important because then we can introduce not just myself, but the walking officer to employees and to the business owners, and to really exchange information so that if the business owners don't know who to contact if there's property crime crimes or any other situation, then they will have that contact information. But more importantly, that's going to create relationships. And while we're there, we actually help the different businesses to harden their business, right? To understand better what they can do to help with deterring crimes that can happen, whether you're in a coffee shop or whether you're selling small gifts. And so that's something that my office will be working with OPD on immediately here for the Montclair Village. It's something that we've already worked on in the Laurel Business District and actually created a video as well so that the businesses there can actually share it with their employees. Another thing that I want to put forward is a policy proposal from the City Council. And the policy proposal that I'm proposing is to require that there's at least one police officer in every police area, right? And so unless there's an emergency, because as we see right now, OPD is stretched really thin. As you heard from Captain Bolton, and thank you so much, Captain Bolton, for your work with my office and being so responsive to everybody in the community here in the area. We are very lucky to have Captain Bolton. But I want to put forward a policy that says that we should have at least one officer in a police area, and so that the neighborhoods and the communities can feel safer. We know that police presence is a deterrent in itself, and so if we can have that, instead of sending a lot of our officers, if not all of them, from a certain area to a different area and then leaving that area open, then that can actually help in regards to not just getting officers to a scene a lot faster, but also it can help to be used as a deterrent as well. And so that's policy that I'm working on right now to push forward to actually have that be implemented. And this is actually in regards to Measure Y, which was renewed as Measure Z. So this is the voters, right? The voters have voted on this, and that in Measure Z, it says that it gives 5 officers, 1 for each police area. There's 5 police area. And so 1 officer for 5 police area. And so for me, I think it's prudent that City Hall actually deliver on its promise and allow for there to be at least 1 officer in that area. And I see that my time is up.
Thank you. I think it might be because of the mics not being very compatible. If we could just stay in the panel seating, I think that'll work. If we go ahead, District Attorney, if you have any comments, and then Captain Bolton and Daniel.
Well, a lot of what we recommend to people is that when you're walking down the street, be aware of your surroundings. So we see a lot of people that walk looking at their cell phone, texting, whatever, not paying attention to what's around them. And for the robberies that we end up reviewing and charging, more often than not, someone has been walking down the street with their cell phone, looking down, not being aware, and someone comes up from behind, knocks them down, steals their purse, steals their phone, and they're gone. And so part of it is just being really aware, being an alert pedestrian. And the other thing is that I know this has happened in other parts of Oakland, and I know that this is what you're working on now, is that, and I remember I see Carl Chan there, who is really coordinated this in Chinatown, cameras in all of the businesses, and you can't emphasize enough how the cameras assist. Not only does it help us to identify somebody, which allows the police to solve the crime, allows us to prosecute those crimes, but it also is a deterrent to people. If they know they're going to be on camera, then they're less likely to walk into a place where the cameras are working. And so the cameras are very, very helpful. The last thing I'd say is that what we believe is that there are a lot of crimes that are happening against people that are not being reported because of frustration, because of believing nothing will happen. How are you ever going to solve it? So we really encourage people to report crimes because, as to the council member's point, that the number of crimes that occur in a certain area that are being reported, that's the data that will help drive policy. And I think that what we see then is we find out after the fact that when somebody is apprehended for a certain crime, knocking someone down and stealing their purse or stealing their cell phone, that's not the first time that it's happened. And we hear that from community members who read about it in the paper and things. So we really encourage people to make a police report so that we can make sure that we're giving focus and being able to drive policy about resources and other things like that.
I've already shared some of the immediate steps that we will be taking for this particular policing beat. We will be opening a project in collaboration with the Montclair Village Association, we're going to take Starbucks, Pete's, and other businesses up on their offers to assist with that project. That's a short-term project, but with a long-time goal of seeing what may work, what may benefit two issues primarily, and that is auto burglary and laptop theft. So that's at the beat level. I'm also here because I told you that we have 732 police officers assigned right now and working, but we are budgeted for 792 officers. We have 60 vacancies, and we also have about 50 additional of those 732, 50 additional officers who are unable to work, either to leave, sickness, long-term injury. So I'd be remiss if I did not mention that the city's and the chief's goal of continuing better recruitment. So my short term is, if anyone is willing to drop an application to join our team, we will set you up with the right person. There we go, right there. We got one young lady in the front row. She's backing up from me as I see it. And I just want to say that Ray Chavez is from, you're still with the, well, I call it the Tribune, but he's making me nervous because I've known him for over 20 years. Every time he's taken my picture, a rock or a bottle has been thrown at me under normal circumstances. So when I hear him shuddering behind me, I'm looking for the crowd that it wants to hit my head with something. All right, thanks, Ray. Yeah, thanks. I'm sorry, was there a question? Yeah, oh, great. So we mentioned volunteerism. That's another great way for community members to help. Every police officer that we hire goes through a community member panel. You get a say on what type of candidate you want to see hired. That's an excellent idea as well. Again, hit me up. In addition to the recruiting, the hiring and the training, we are working to reduce the attrition from our academies. Historically, we have a very tough academy to pass. I think there's good things about that, and then there's bad things about that. Obviously, if we put the time and energy to hire somebody who we think is going to make a good police officer, we want to make them successful and see them pass and have a long career here. So we're restructuring academy training. We're restructuring what we call field training, which is even after 6 months of the academy, we go through 26 weeks. Does that sound right? It's been too long for me. What? Yeah, more than 6 months of additional training with another officer. We're reconfiguring that as well to reduce the attrition. The other way, other impact that I think that we can make as a community, and I think it's evident here whenever I go to a meeting and people want to see more walking officers. They want more time from their community resource. I know that the men and women of this police department add a tremendous amount of value to the city of Oakland. That is something that you can share with me, for my officers, for all of our officers citywide. We want to retain people here. We want people to stay because they feel respected, they feel valued, and they feel like their career is worthwhile. It is a tough profession as of late, rightfully so, receiving criticism, often rightfully so, but often unjustly so. This is the one profession where an officer in Washington, D.C. makes a mistake and we get the anger of it, rightfully so. But it is also an honorable profession, and please send any applicants our way.
So just to echo a little bit of what you've heard already, you've probably familiar with the adage, if you see something, say something. And I think what we want to do is be alert, be attentive, but also, if somebody's walking around looking into multiple cars, checking door handles, take that opportunity to put yourself in a safe space and call call the police. The non-emergency number is 510-777-3333. If you have a cell phone and you dial 911, you go to Highway Patrol. So you would need to dial 510-777-3211 to get to the emergency channel for Oakland dispatch from a cell phone. So, we need not only those individuals to make people aware that something may be going on, even if you don't think that the resources are going to respond, you never know. There's oftentimes an officer on the beat parked close by. Of course, there's other priorities. Of course, there's greater needs at certain times, but you don't know. Somebody could be right there, right around the corner, and could come by and just interrupt that activity so that it doesn't occur. We also have contracted security services, we, the Village Association, with Bay Alarm. So if you're in the village, you could drop into one of the merchants, let them know what you saw, ask them to call Bay Alarm. We have a call response program. They will dispatch an agent. So step one, call the police. Step two, try to get a hold of a merchant to call Bay Alarm, because if the police can't come out, Bay Alarm could be there 10 to 15 minutes is what we've seen from their response. And again, they could just observe, be present in a way that maybe disrupt the activity that could be going on. You also have, the opportunity to lend some support. You heard volunteerism. If you're inclined, I mentioned earlier that we've received wonderful contributions, just unsolicited, from the community to help go towards additional installations of high-resolution license plate recognition cameras. We're trying to do another round of those. MontclairVillage.com has a button for a GoFundMe if you're inclined. And then talk to your representatives as well. We definitely want to make voices heard about the concerns so that they can gather data, they can gather information, they can make informed decisions in the same way that we see a wonderful gathering here tonight. It's unfortunate that, it takes a tragic occurrence for that to happen. So stay engaged. The Montclair Village Association newsletter I mentioned is a way to find out about, the good things, but also some calls to action as well. And we can communicate where we think our community can best assert their thoughts and their influence when decisions are being made.
Okay. Thank you, Daniel. If you could just hold the mic there, that'd be great. I understand that County Supervisor Nate Miley is in the room. County Supervisor, are you here still? Raise your hand. Where are you? Yeah. There he is. Thank you. Thank you, Nate. I really appreciate the presence of all of you. Okay, so the next question that I have is, there's a lead into this. The quote is, this is from Joey Prather. Oakland is the 10th most dangerous city in the United States. Crime was at 15% across the board in 2019, with auto and home burglaries increasing 38% and 22% respectively in a single year. Yet city leadership still seems reluctant to express outrage for the violence and criminality that affects so many people from all walks of life. Are the leaders of Oakland prepared to stand up to the crime and send a clear message that enough is enough, and that this criminality will no longer be tolerated? And there were some related questions about prosecution of crimes for the district attorney can speak to that. So if you all could comment on that, and if time allows, if the other council members would like to chime in, we will try to incorporate. I think there was a request for that as well.
I mean, my comment would just be, stay engaged. We have council meetings that are open to the public. We have direct access. Councilmember Thao has been amazing, always very responsive from what I've heard in my experience personally. So be able to reach out as you showed up tonight, show up again and again and again. That's what it'll take.
I think the question was more for city leaders and perhaps not for the police department, but I can tell you from my standpoint, and speaking for the men and women who work in your police area and for your police beats, that we are the ones that see crime and violence firsthand and all too often. We are impacted and affected by it as you are. I want to take this as an opportunity to say, in line with is enough enough? We are also at the police department creating an auto burglary task force. This is an Alameda County wide. I believe every agency in Alameda County has contributed some officers. We will be having some specialized operations to target auto burglaries. I think that's a good indication that we realize that this is an upward trend, as pointed out by the question. That's at a city level. At the beat level, especially the beat 13Z level, when we're talking about the crimes that I mentioned before, the assaults, which really are not, they happen and they are of course important, but on a grand scale or 20,000 foot level, nowhere near the problem that other beats in Oakland have. Focusing in on the auto burglaries, which have increased tremendously for beat 13Z. Not just primarily in Montclair Village, but almost exclusively in Montclair Village. I've looked at a lot of crime data, and a lot of trends, and I'm fairly savvy on how to look at hotspots and where we need to focus our efforts. Does anyone have a guess at where the auto burglaries are completely have completely exploded in Montclair? Just go ahead and say it. So you know intuitively what the Safeway was the answer. Daniel and I and Officer Jurgens Duenas have known this for some time. We are having efforts to convince Safeway of their role in this, and I don't want to speak ill of them because they're not here as representing themselves, but I can promise you that I will be personally, with Daniel's help, I will be personally reaching out to whatever it needs to be done, regional or national level, to try to get some focus from Safeway on that issue. We had a similar problem 2 years ago with Lucky. Daniel's effort, the cameras, the problem-solving approach has completely changed auto burglaries in Montclair from Lucky over to Safeway. If we can make... Is there a Montclair joke that I'm not clear on? Yeah, okay. That makes sense now. You got me. If we can focus in on Safeway, as we did before, I think if we can impact that 40 to 60 incidents, which I think are firmly reported and connected to the Safeway lot, we can make a tremendous impact, the biggest impact on Montclair crime, just by engaging them as stakeholders and partners.
So what happens when the police do their investigation and they bring the cases over to the charging or the reviewing deputies that work in my office? And if the case has sufficient evidence that a crime occurred and that the person who's been arrested is the person who did the crime, we believe, then we'll file the charges. On the average, each year we file about 5,000 felony cases. And Alameda County is a county where while the homicides are down, we still have far too many homicides in this county. We also file about 20,000 misdemeanor cases. And while they are lower level punishment, lower level crimes primarily, there are also opportunities that we have to intervene, to give very constructive intervention for people not to escalate to a higher level of crime. And again, we put a lot of resources in making sure that if somebody's prepared to address their issues, we will help to provide the resources for them or help to get them into a program. The robberies that we are looking at all the time are becoming very similar. I mean, the robberies are the laptop robberies, and the task force that the captain talks about, we're the advisors to the task force. We're part of it also. And we have several cases right now that are involving major laptop rings or theft rings that are going around stealing laptops. A big operation that happened, the Fremont Police actually was the lead on it at the end of it, but it was multi-jurisdictional. And they recovered 3,000 laptops that were in a container ship about to be sent out of the country. So we know it's big business. We know cell phones thefts are big business. And there are containers in San Francisco where somebody can steal a cell phone and take to San Francisco and drop it in the box or sell it. So we know this is big business outside of the United States to have the cell phones or laptops. And we work very closely, again, with Starbucks. Starbucks is probably the most engaged from our perspective to talk with law enforcement about what they're doing. In some Starbucks, they don't even have plugs anymore because they don't want people to be sitting there all day sort of unconsciously working on their laptop like it's their front room. That's not a criticism of people, but people just get used to being there and they're not as alert as they might otherwise be. We have about less than 40 courts in this county that are dedicated to to handling criminal cases. And so cases oftentimes take much longer in the court system than we think they should. We have a lot of, as I said earlier, we have several collaborative courts, which means that they're really a court that's designed to address people's issues and get them linked into services and stop their behaviors. And we've been successful. We keep a lot of data around that because we want to make sure that what we're doing is actually making a difference. But we do have individuals that come back over and over again. And, for robberies particularly, that's what is considered a serious violent felony. You know that, but it's also recognized in the law. And if somebody is convicted of a robbery case, that's not only a serious crime that could expose them to state prison, but it also is a crime that has very severe consequences if they get convicted of another crime. So again, I have 9 different offices throughout the county. We have 2 offices, 2 branches here in Oakland where we handle all the misdemeanors and all the felony cases.
So the question. Okay, good. Okay, that's an interesting question. When are the elected officials going to, I think, care enough or something similar to that?
So are the leaders of Oakland prepared to stand up to the crime and send a clear message that enough is enough and that this criminality will no longer?
Okay. For me personally, and I think a lot of my colleagues on the city council as well, we're very frustrated, right? And I know that there's a lot of loss in our own personal family. Myself, in just last year, in 2019, my home was broken into. I was at City Hall working, and my home was broken into. My son didn't have school that day, and he wanted to stay home. They broke into my home while my baby was home. And that was the scariest thing. But they didn't hurt him. They saw him after rummaging through all my stuff. They saw him and they ran out. My brother is a victim of gun violence. This hits us all very hard. And so I'm taking violence very seriously every day that I am working. Every day. And I know my colleagues are too, because we know that one life loss is one way too many. And when I heard about the incident at Montclair, I just could not keep the tears in, even when I was at the memorial, because all I could think about is, what if that was my baby, right? Because that is somebody's son. Mr. Zeng is from China. He is the only kid because they have the one-child law. Think about that. Let that sink in. For his parents, it's devastating. And so that's why it's important. OPD can't do this on their own. There's 732 officers, right? In this huge city, we need more officers, but well-trained officers. And yet, so we have minimum resources, right? We don't have enough dollars to fund more officers, and we need to actually fill our vacancies. However, we need to work with OPD. We need to work with our communities. We need to talk to each other. The businesses, we need to work with the businesses. We need to give them information in regards to how to harden their business. We need to be cognizant that if we're using your laptops, your cell phones out, that you need to be aware of your surroundings, right? And we need to be out there and work with each other. I cannot do my job at all without the help of the community. And that's why it's so important for me to always be out in the community. That's why I came out immediately, and I wasn't hiding or anything. I came out immediately when I heard that this happened. And I did a pop-up office hours, coming to this meeting, and I always try to be available because crime is not a thing that we can joke about. Being a victim of crime is terrible, especially when it involves children, especially when it's your kids, and I think we can all relate to that. It doesn't matter what background we come from, and so for me, I take it seriously, and that's why I'm very serious about this policy around having at least one officer. If there's not an emergency where there's some sort of shootout or what have you, there should be at least one officer in each police area. And I hope that you all can help support me on that and help me get the 5 votes on the council as well. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilmember. I'd like to just take a moment. If the other council members would like to say a minute, speak for a minute, I want to give them the opportunity to do that because of the question. Would you like to speak, Councilmember Kalb?
Hi, Dan Kalb, District 1 Council Member. I'll try to be brief. First of all, I want to thank everybody for being here today and for all you being here today. I meet with Captain Bolton at least once a month. In fact, we have a meeting tomorrow, and we go over all the crime statistics in my district, which includes almost where we are now. I feel like whether it's the frustration or the demand or the fear or the concern, on a monthly basis, I'm engaging in that, talking with people, getting upset, talking with the captain, with the police chief on occasion. There's a lot we have to do, but let me just talk about one of those things. As you heard, we are down 60 officers in terms of what we have in the budget. And the only way to rectify that, if you want more crimes, the more serious crimes, to be investigated, because we're not going to solve reduce the crime problem if they're not investigated and we're not catching some of the perpetrators. So we have to do that. So if you want to have more crimes, more serious crimes and violent crimes investigated, and investigated with success, and if you want the walking officers to be more present on a more regular basis in the areas around town, including here, we have to fill those vacancies. And the only way to do that is to have more police academies. So what I'm going to be asking for in our mid-cycle budget, which is coming up in the spring, is to add one more police academy to our current budget beyond what we already put in the budget. Because the only way we will have more officers to do the things we want them to do, we need them to do, that you expect them to do, is to have enough police academies to hire enough officers to fill most of those vacancies. So that's one of my top priorities, and I hope you'll support that when it comes time this spring to make those decisions. And I'll just close by saying, we all know that it takes more than just police to reduce crime over the long run. That's absolutely critical, and our Department of Violence Prevention is part of that important, comprehensive effort. But police are part of that comprehensive effort, and we have to have enough officers on staff to be part of that effort, to investigate crimes, respond quickly, and to have the walking patrols that we all want. So that's my priority, and we're working on that as every week goes by.
Thank you. Lynette, did you want to come up? I know. I just want to give her some time if she wants to. Okay. Noel, go ahead, and then we'll let...
Just really quickly, I am here, I represent District 5, the Fruitville area, the Glenville area, and I grew up here in East Oakland. And certainly when you talk about the 125 killings at that time growing up, it was a lot more than that. So I understand in terms of when it comes to violence, because I grew up in it. I still live in East Oakland, and the reason I'm here is because I wanted to hear from you. I wanted to hear from you what your recommendations are, because in my district, in the Fruitville area, next week we're having a similar meeting. But when I meet with the Highway Patrol, the Sheriff Department, I meet with the FBI, the U.S. Marshals, Oakland Police Departments to address the issue. We already have walking officers on International, and it's up to the captain to assign them. And we have assigned 2 that walk International. Certain days, they got to do other things, or they got to be on overtime. But the other one that I want to tell you, that there are businesses that have hired police officers on an overtime basis to take care of their property. Home Depot's one. You go to Home Depot, there's 2 full-time officers that are being paid by Home Depot $100 an hour to be there to not only deal with the robberies we were having inside Home Depot, because we were having 19 a day. And then we were being burglarized on the outside daily, based on the activity that surrounds Home Depot. And I can tell you, having the 2 officers full-time, it stopped the inside robberies altogether. And they patrolled the surrounding area and it stopped all the car burglaries. So there are businesses, including the Business Improvement District in my area, that we're looking to see how do I hire a full-time officer over time to monitor the BART station, because we're having a great time, a hard time. But also the Business Improvement District, they have hired ambassadors, and they also have hired security guards to deal with the business corridors. So there are, but I'm here to listen to you, and I appreciate and I value you being here and your recommendations, and thank you for your time. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilmember. I also really want to honor your time, and there are a lot of questions, and I think it's very important. It is very important that you all have a voice, and I just want to emphasize something that Councilmember Kalb mentioned, which goes back to Chief Cespedes, which is this comprehensive work that needs to be done. And, yes, we need to have more walking patrols. We also need to work very seriously on violence prevention, and we need to be empowered, and we need to vote. And I want to just remind or just to let you know, not remind you, just to let you know that there's some amazing resources in the back of this room, starting with the League of Women Voters are here. If you've moved recently, please make sure to check with them so that you're ready to vote in March. And also there's some other petitions that are there. Helen Hutchinson, the former president of the League of Women Voters of the state of California, is here.
Can we go to question number 3?
Thank you. We're not going to get past 2 questions.
We have 4. There's question number 3. There are hundreds of questions here.
No, that's not fair.
So what we're going to do is we are going to have to, because we're at time at 8:30 and we only have 3 minutes to go.
You started with questions for people who weren't here. That's not right. You should have started with questions of people who weren't here. We got 2 questions.
There are people who submitted them in advance are also here.
That's not fair. If they're not here, then they should be last.
The ones that, okay, so I had promised you that we would go to 8:30. We will have another meeting if that is what we need to do, but I don't want to keep you to go through all these questions, because if I'm not going to be able to get through all of them, there's no way. So we will take one more question.
There's no rule of law in this community. You guys have failed. You can't hire the police
So
officers.
if you have a question, then please, we will take it.
You won't be able to
No,
hire
I'm
them.
sorry.
Because part of it is the anti-police
I'm
attitude.
sorry, we have
of the
some
entire
meeting
community.
norms that
Yeah,
we
you
agree
tried
to
shut
at
me down.
first.
You have tried to shut down free speech in this
This
audience,
is not about
and
that.
also through this very controlled process.
Thank you.
You guys have not imposed rule of law in this society. It's broken down. I have full sympathy for the captain.
You really need to show some respect for the rest of us.
I think they
We
need
will
to show
take
respect
one
to
more
us.
question.
And don't lecture me.
So the next question on the list.
And there's another guy killed. The musician's been killed as well.
Yeah.
Somebody has to stop this at some point. And a little anger is actually justified at this point.
Okay. We'll take the next question on the list. Will the panel consider supporting a zero tolerance for crime campaign in Montclair, where we work together to draft an overall coordinated plan and implement it? This will work well into our next steps, with support from OPD, government, the neighborhood council, MVA, residents, rather than work in a piecemeal fashion.
I can defer to Councilmember Tang. So in the interest of time, I think there are probably a lot of questions that I can primarily answer, and if need be, somebody else can step in. My personal views on zero tolerance is that you never threaten something that you can't deliver. So it's okay to have It's okay to want your community to thrive and be safe, but I think the realities of what zero tolerance is, it's really unrealistic. There's also, other examples of how zero tolerance leads to hotspot policing, and perhaps unequal or unequitable treatment for certain people under certain situations and conditions. What I think everybody on this panel would commit to is a well-coordinated approach with the resources we have at our disposal, with a future plan of getting more staffing, better officers, better trained officers, or at least equally sustained trained officers, so that we can provide you the police department that we feel you deserve. That's what's in progress right now. Do you believe OPD is adequately staffed? I think no one in the city would say that we are adequately staffed, and that's a two-part, maybe even a multiple part response. I've already told you the issues that we are trying to deal with. We are trying to do better. We are trying to build up that force. There are a number of improvements that I won't have time to mention, but if you want to attend a public safety meeting or one of the other city meetings where you have men and women from the training division, from our fiscal services, from our recruiting and background unit, these things are often also posted online on Legistar, and you can begin to find out what those long-term solutions are. Are they available to Montclair merchants in a timely manner? I'll be honest with you, no, they're not. Because if you looked at our calls for service for the city of Oakland and the crime with which we face, we are forced to be very flexible and deploy people where we believe others need them the most. And so there are times where we will be delayed. There are times when an officer is not immediately available to you on the beat, but that's not because they're choosing that to be their reality. That's because they are needed somewhere else. The other long-term solutions, Chief Cespedes is here, and what he is working on, members of his outreach teams, our ceasefire strategy. Ultimately, although those officers and much of that focus is in East Oakland or other beats where serious violent crime is an epidemic, that helps you in the long run. Because the better we control crime elsewhere in the city, the more availability we have, the more flexibility we have, and the more opportunity we have to face other concerns equally and fairly throughout the whole city. Does that make sense? So those strategies are paying off. If you look at the 3-year, the 5-year, Councilmember Gallo is remembering time before I was here where it was much higher during certain times in history. It was far higher. We are on the right path, and that path ultimately leads not only to a safer Oakland, but a safer Montclair. Have you looked ahead? Is there anything that I can try to check off?
There's a lot there.
Is Captain Bolton doing a great job? Yes. And you should write to Chief Kirkpatrick and let her know that you love him as your area captain. Thank you.
Yeah, excellent. So I just want to emphasize that the panelists do want to hear from you. The city council member staff reminded me about how to contact her office. We will make sure that the questions are responded to. If you would like to see more meetings like this, please make sure you've signed in. Please take up Captain Bolton's suggestion, which is to stay involved. That's the only way things are going to get better. And there's many other ways of getting involved in the meantime. I wish I just want to emphasize your voice is important, and we do appreciate you coming tonight. In terms of any other upcoming meetings, is there any other announcements about things coming up that they can attend?
Can Michael share the next NCPC meeting?
Yeah, do you want to go ahead?
Normally, we have community meetings the first Thursday of every month, or four times during the course of the year, every quarter. It was supposed to be on first Thursday in February, but, this is our community meeting. But nevertheless, we also, the board meets monthly when we're not having a community meeting, but anybody from the community is welcome to attend and help us do our business. But what I want to say are two things. First of all, I've lived in Montclair now for 25 years. I've lived in the East Bay for 30 years. Before that, back when I was in graduate school, I was in St. Louis in the late 70s and early 80s. Believe me, this is a really safe place. And before that, I grew up in a small town in northern Minnesota, which was a really safe place. Well, this kind of reminds me a little bit of growing up in that small town. So I've got to say, some of the complaints I know, it's tough when people get killed or where there are burglaries and the like. So we are the first line of defense. And the only way we'll feel comfortable and safe in this community is to be engaged in the community. How many of you know the 5 neighbors on either side of you? Wonderful. Those who didn't raise their hand, think about just doing that. You may not like them, but once you get to know them, when things happen, like when the earthquake happens, because we're right on the Hayward Fault, we all know that. When the fires come over, like they are in Australia, think about that. We have to depend on one another. Same way with property crime and robberies and the like. We have to be aware and look out for one another. The police are only a small number. It's up to all of us to make our community safe. So the next public meeting, community meeting, is going to be in May. The first Thursday in May, we're going to ask, we'll have a program for the public. But every first Thursday we meet in this room to do our business. And you're all welcome to join us. Thank you.
Thank you. So before we just completely do a wrap, I wanted to give a minute to Mr. Carl Chan, who is the informal mayor of Chinatown. That's how I know Carl. He's an amazing leader, and he has a message from Mr. Zeng's family.
First, I would say, my other capacity, I'm also the chair for the Chinatown NCPC. And I've been working with the family for the past entire week. They came from China. So what their parents would like to express, and they would like to say thank you to all of you and for your support. And definitely they want to asking for justice, but they don't want you to remember their son only as a victim. They want to remember him as a bright young man and who hopefully can help to bring safety, public safety to Montclair, and as well as the entire city of Oakland. And tomorrow, sadly enough, it's going to be the first time that parents will be going to the mortuary, seeing the corpse, their son, the first time. And the Oakland Chinatown Chamber of Commerce, we will have our Chinese New Year celebration every year, which is going to be this Saturday and Sunday. And along with the Chinatown Chamber of Commerce, the Chinatown NCPC, OCA, as well as APAPA and a few organizations, will be doing volunteer work to do the fundraising for the family. And the family telling me that they would rather spend the money into something can help the community. Perhaps it could be a scholarship and to remember him. So once again, on behalf of the family and the parents, and they really want to express their sincere thank you, and especially the people from the Montclair area. And hopefully that after this meeting, we will all work together and have a safer community, not only for the Montclair, but the entire city of Oakland. And thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chan. So,
I almost forgot, people said, where is our mayor? In fact, the mayor had written a personal letter and asking me to deliver the letter to the parents.
So, just to kind of bring us all back, I really appreciate you all coming. I want to also appreciate all of our panelists who took the time out and our They're dedicated public servants and servant leaders, and we're very fortunate in Oakland to have these amazing people. So please stay involved. It's going to take all of us to make and improve our city. Thank you very much.